Just let us know when we're good to go.
Okay, hang on one sec. Okay, it's up and live. You're good to go.
Okay, I'll do a countdown so we can cut this eventually. In 3, 2, 1. Good evening, basketball fans, and welcome to the Centennial Conference's 4th annual basketball tournament chat. My name is Steve Ulrich. I'm the executive director of the Centennial Conference, and I'm joined tonight by 4 of our outstanding play-by-play men who have done men's and women's games all season long. We have Doug Raftery from McDaniel, Connor Flegel from Washington College, Brian Stabby from Johns Hopkins, and Bob Long from Swarthmore. And what we're looking to do today, we're just going to talk some basketball. We're going to take a look at the 5 teams that make up the men's side of the bracket, and then we'll take a look at the women's tournament as well. And let's just get things started. We open up on Wednesday night. First round men's game, it will be number 5 seed McDaniel against number 4 seed Gettysburg. And I'm going to turn it right over to Doug. Doug, you've covered the Green Terror this year. Had a shot at a higher seed coming into the last game of the season. Wasn't able to beat Gettysburg at home, and now we have a rematch. What are your thoughts about the Green Terror and how they've played here down the stretch?
Sure. It's great to be here, by the way, Steve. Thanks for allowing me to join, and certainly good to see a bunch of the other guys as well. I mean, this is a matchup, at least for me, seeing these two teams play just on Saturday at the Gill Center in Westminster, that I don't think favors McDaniel at all. I really don't. You take a look at that game, it was a 58-46 win for Gettysburg. It was a game in late January that McDaniel won on the road, just down the road in Gettysburg. It was a shot at the elbow from Wes Brooks, one of the leading scorers on the team, with 1.7 seconds remaining. But in that game in late January, Tim Stewart, he needed to go 15 of 20 from the field, career high 34 points. It was a game that I don't think was going to be replicated back this past Saturday, and it sure wasn't. But Wes Brooks and Tim Stewart, they still had 31 of the 46 in that 12-point loss on Saturday. But for Gettysburg, it's a team that coming into that game on Saturday had lost 2 in a row. McDaniel had won 5 of 6. And all of a sudden, after Gettysburg won, it seemed like the tides changed completely. Gettysburg then kind of put a whooping on Ursinus on Monday. McDaniel barely got past Valley Forge. And I feel like there's 2 teams going in different directions.
Well, let me turn to Connor. You had a chance to see the Green Terror on Wednesday night, and what were your thoughts about how the Terror played? Unfortunately, it doesn't sound like Connor was able to hear us. We're going to.
Well, McDaniel, I'm not sure whether taking Washington lightly, which the short finish, they were not necessarily playing at full speed. Off her game a little bit, but the defense for the Green Terror really impressed me. They were able to step up and really force the Shore women to miss a lot of really good looks, lots of layups at the rim that they altered at the last second, open jump shots, and then they were able to do something which they haven't had the most success at to keep Washington from getting the second chance opportunity.
I'm struggling a little bit to hear you, Connor. Struggling a little bit.
Them by in games, and
we'll jump over to Brian right now. Brian, you've done this call for a while. You've followed the conference from your time at Franklin Marshall and now to Johns Hopkins. We all knew what Tim Stewart was capable of doing, McDaniel. But talk about the play of Wes Brooks. He has really stepped it up here the last few weeks in the senior season.
Yeah, Wes Brooks, 15 points per game, shooting just a hair under 50% from beyond the arc. He's the best three-point shooter in the Centennial Conference. This is a team where we talk about teams that are building something. When you look at McDaniel, in my mind, this is a team that is built with 6 seniors. This is sort of the coming together. you, I think, anticipated that they were going to have a chance to make it to the postseason, and they were able to squeak in. The loss of Dwayne Eccles hurt them towards the end of the year. He was a productive guy, and he was a hard fighter out there on the floor. But when I think of McDaniel, they, to me, embody what makes this conference so fun. I was doing a little bit of preparation for this, and I thought back. I had to look up the date. It was on February 6th. They were a game under 500 overall and a game under 500 in the conference. And playing against Ursinus, they were down by 12 with a little bit more than 4.5 minutes left to go. And I texted a friend of mine who's a big-time Centennial Conference fan, and I said, I think McDaniel might be toast. And lo and behold, they came all the way back. They won that game. They went 4-1 down the stretch, and they made it in. So I will have my serving of humble pie. I think that after the finish they were able to show in the last half of this season, maybe on paper this matchup doesn't favor them against Gettysburg, but I don't know. Any time I've written them out, I've been wrong, so I will not bet against McDaniel in this game, at least without seeing them take the floor.
Bob, you had a chance to see both Gettysburg and McDaniel this year. One of the things that I think really stood out to us in the conference is when Swarthmore knocked off Gettysburg, it kind of made the pronouncement to the entire conference that the Garnet had arrived. Your thoughts going into this matchup between Gettysburg and McDaniel?
Sure, yeah. I'll take you back to that game where Swarthmore was able to take down Gettysburg. It really was, I think you put it very well, a statement made to the rest of the conference at that point that they were there to stay, and then to complete that season sweep was big for the Garnet. But this Gettysburg's team still provides a lot of matchup problems, I think, and McDaniel only got to see the one time, but I still feel that they are a very solid, very deep team. I do think that the matchups that Gettysburg provides, though, are somewhat difficult to play against, but I think the matchup itself is very, very intriguing and clearly a very difficult team waiting at the end of that.
Doug, one of the things you've seen with Gettysburg time and time again is how they run their offense, a Princeton-style offense, backdoor cuts, three-pointers, and when they get out in front and they get a lead, they're awfully tough to beat.
Yeah, they sure are. I mean, this is a team that's lethal. I mean, you mentioned, three guys: Tanner Kirkpatrick, Cody Kiefer, and of course Kevin Gladstone. And that first game I mentioned in late January with Gettysburg and McDaniel, the game that McDaniel won, Kevin Gladstone was coming off the bench, so he's still working his way back from injury. Still poured in 20 of the 65 points for Gettysburg, but I think it was a little bit of a different look, and the Bolts were still kind of making their way and finding their way with Kevin Gladstone. Now he was back in the starting lineup this past Saturday, provided a little bit of matchup issues from the start for McDaniel. Listen, in the end, for the Green Terror, it's about, can they find a third scorer? I mean, that's been the story of the entire season. Whether it's been Josh McWilliams, he's kind of been called Big Shot McWilliams. He's made a lot of solid shots at the end of games. There's been a couple guys here and there who have been able to do that. Austin Cannon, the freshman. But like Brian mentioned, the loss of Dwayne Eccles, I think, turned the season for the Green Terror in a different way. It's the type of game I don't think McDaniel minds being in, a low-scoring game. It's not a shootout. It's not going to be a high-scoring game. But at the same time, you have to remember, this is also the same spot they were in last year, Steve. They lost to Gettysburg, the final game of the regular season. They traveled to Gettysburg in the first round, and they were knocked out in the first round. So maybe that's in the back of the minds, too, saying, hey, it's payback time.
That's a great point, Doug. Connor, you look at the Bullet lineup, and that's a big team. You look at Kiefer, who can handle the ball. You look at Tanner Kirkpatrick, who shoots the three. You look at Alex Kaslander, who's now moved into the starting lineup. He's at 6'4" guard. Gladstone. Connor, that's a big team that George Petrie puts out on the floor.
It is, and perhaps what's more scary, they're big, yes, but they're a very balanced team. Obviously, they're led at the top in scoring by Gladstone. He's 9th in the league in scoring, but if you shut down Gladstone, there's still 4, 5, 6 other players on that Bullet squad that can step up and they can cause you trouble on the inside. They can step out and hit the three, something that Gettysburg's very good at. They lead the conference in three-point shooting. They've made almost 200 threes already this year, so you might be able to cut off players like a Gladstone or a Kiefer down low in the post, but if you do that, you still have to worry about guys like Kirkpatrick on the outside, Matt England. Pete Chris can step back and hit you the three every now and then. So perhaps the scary part about Gettysburg, and one of the reasons why, for the longest time this year, they were that second seed in the league. They'd beaten Franklin and Marshall to get to 8-1, and then for whatever reason, the Bullets kind of fell apart. Gladstone missed a couple games, but you're talking about a Gettysburg team that started the year off 8-1 and then just finished off 4-5 to drop back into the 4-5 game when it looked like they were a sure thing for a first-round bye. So the Bullets, a 4 seed, yes, but a very scary 4 seed, a problem for any team when it comes to matchups.
Brian, Bill Nelson, Johns Hopkins has always done a good job defending the Gettysburg offense. What does McDaniel need to do to keep Gettysburg from having those fluid cuts, spotting up, hitting those threes, and getting the early lead?
Yeah, I think with Gettysburg, knowing that they run this Princeton offense, that they're going to be able to shoot the three, first and foremost, you got to know that you got to be able to defend the perimeter. They're still going to make shots, but they're going to be taking them, so you might as well go out and defend. Their one weakness, if you can find one to exploit, is that they're a little bit thin in terms of teams that have deep post presences. So guys where if you can run fresh legs out there in those 4s and 5s, the power forwards and the centers, you might be able to wear them down. Teams that live and die by the three, it can be a challenge, particularly in the postseason. Obviously, you like to have the ability to shoot from downtown. I think in this conference, historically, it hasn't necessarily been as much of a necessity. I have always enjoyed watching guys, sort of the post play we've seen in the Centennial Conference. Gettysburg is a little bit of a departure from that. But when you look at this roster, I think 2-3 years ago, people were saying the things that, and not to jump ahead too much, what people are saying about Swarthmore right now. It said, listen, they're dangerous. They're going to be able to put something together and produce, and we're seeing that pay off. And they're not done yet. I mean, they just have one senior. Next year, they're going to be lethal. Obviously, we're focused on 2016 playoffs. But right now, I think it's going to be a pretty good game. It's good for them to be able to play it at home. It's always a challenge to have to go on the road and win a game, no matter how far you have to travel. For McDaniel, not too far, but anytime you got to go into unfriendly territory, it presents challenges, and they just have to try and ride that out.
It's prediction time for Game 1. We'll start with Bob. Who do you have, Bob? Gettysburg, McDaniel.
I think this one's close, guys. I think it goes down toward the end, but at the end of the day, I think the matchup issues that Gettysburg provides will lead to the victory, and I think Gettysburg, close one, makes their way out to Lancaster.
Doug?
Is Coach Curley watching?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to go against my my own broadcast. I'm gonna go with Gettysburg, just based on what I saw on Saturday and what I saw Sunday, by the way, against Valley Forge, a team that is quite frankly weak, and a team that McDaniel didn't take care of until late into the second half. I think advantage Gettysburg.
Connor, your choice: Gettysburg, McDaniel.
Yeah, I've got to go with the other guys. I have to go with Gettysburg. They've been playing. Recently, they haven't been playing so great. I mentioned they started off 8-1, then they've kind of faded, but they've played the most consistent basketball of these two teams this year. And if they get hot from shooting and have the ability to score, I'm not sure if McDaniel has the weapons to keep up with them outside of Stewart and Brooks. Stewart and Brooks can get you a combined 40 points, but then where the rest of your points are going to come from, that's been an issue for McDaniel for a lot of times this season. And G-Bird being home obviously helps, and they beat McDaniel in the playoffs last year, so they have the confidence to know that they can do it again. So I think Gettysburg gets it done.
And Brian, your pick in the first round.
Yeah, McDaniel has won, or it has had 4 games this year that have been decided by 2 points or less. And you can either say, well, they're a team that wins by the skin of their teeth, or they take care of business. But I think for Gettysburg, they just have more options right now. Coming off that win over this weekend, I got to go with the Bullets in this the 4-5 game.
First semifinal on Friday night in Lancaster will pit the number 2 seed Swarthmore College Garnet against the number 3 seed Dickinson College Red Devils. So that game tips at 6 o'clock. Bob, it's been quite an amazing season at SWAT this year. Cool record for wins in the season. Certainly something I think longtime watchers of the conference saw the team begin to come together, but I'm not sure we expected it to happen this quickly. Your thoughts?
Well, I mean, it all starts and ends with Landry Kosmalski, the newer head coach of the Swarthmore Garnet men's basketball program, coming from Coming from Davidson College as an assistant, he's done just yeoman's work with this program, and now he has his guys, and that's really the thing, to bring your guys into a program like this. It's a guard-centered type offense. They like to space the floor. They're able to shoot the three very well, and to be able to start 3 sophomores and 2 juniors for the majority of the season has, I think, been very, very helpful for what you'll see in the future. Now, clearly what we're talking about is this weekend and this upcoming tournament. However, I think that these kids that are going to have the experience this upcoming weekend will be big for this Garnet program going forward. And I think clearly the play of Matt Brennan, sophomore point guard, as well as Robbie Walsh, who's a sophomore 6'8" center. What those two can do, good two-man basketball, if they're able to play that. I think this Swarthmore team could continue to surprise people into the Centennial Conference Tournament.
Doug, you had the opportunity to see the Garnet, I hope, and as Bob said, you look at the guard play with Matt Brennan, Zach Yonda, Shane Leffler has come off the bench and has really contributed a great deal. They just keep coming at you in waves. The rotation that Swarthmore has going right now, I think, causes some problems around the conference. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. I think for a lot of people, it's a surprise the spot that they're in. I haven't seen Swarthmore in a while. Saw them back on early December. It was a 10-point win for the Garnet over McDaniel. So both teams were still going through even at that time. Finding the identity. But two things kind of stick out to me within this matchup. Number one is what happened this season between the two teams. Of course, they split the season set, so it's not it's hard to defeat 3 teams in a year. We're not having that conversation. But the other thing I find interesting is not even on the Swarthmore side, but where the Dickinson side. Of course, listen, they're coming off of the great win at F&M, a phenomenal overtime win. Yeah, they've won 7 in a row. They're finding themselves at the perfect time. But this is a team that's had some road struggles here and there. They had a tough non-conference schedule at the beginning of the year, but 6 road losses. They're 0-2 at neutral sites. How's that kind of play out in the tournament?
Excellent points, Connor. Let's talk about that, and let's also talk about some of the play in the post that the Garnet has received. Bob mentioned Robbie Walsh, sophomore, 6'8", who's really blossomed into one of the top pivot players in the conference. He gets help from Sean Thaxter, Andrew Kaufman. They have a nice little rotation of guys that have really stepped up their play since the Garnet lost Chris Bourne, their leading scorer, in mid-January.
Yeah, you figure when they lose a player like Bourne, who's as effective as he is down at the post, who's in the top 5 in the league in both scoring and rebounding when he went out, and with SWAT being such a young team, it's been mentioned already, this roster that has just one senior that's consistently getting minutes in the rotation. You look at the rest of their guys, a lot of their most effective players are sophomores. So you figure when they lose an impact player like Bourne that they would just sort of crumble with the younger team that they are, but they've done anything but. They've gone 9-3 in 12 games without Bourne. Robbie Walsh, a sophomore, he's scoring 10 points a game, leading the conference in shooting 60%, which is obviously a very highly effective number. And if they can take advantage of that and keep going to him down low on the inside because he shoots such a high percentage, I saw it here earlier this year when they played against the Shoremen. Washington struggled with teams with height all year, and Walsh, because he was so big, was just able to abuse defenders consistently down the post and do whatever he will. But SWAT's going to have a little bit of trouble with that. They've got Dickinson does guys in the post like a Ted Henning-Camp, leading scorer in the conference. It can give someone like Walsh some problems. But this SWAT team, they continue to surprise all season long, but they shoot the ball so well. The best scoring team in the conference. And if it comes down to a late game situation, they're free throw shooting. They're the best in the league by 9 points over the next closest team in the league. One thing that might get SWAT into trouble is, yes, they score a lot, but they don't force a ton of turnovers, and if they get to a high-scoring game with Dickinson, like the Red Devils have been known to play in past years, they could be in a little bit of trouble. But if SWAT's able to take care of the ball and shoot at a high percentage, get some looks inside for Walsh and Thaxter, and maybe even a guy like Michael Rubio comes off the bench and provides a couple minutes if needed if some of the other guys get in foul trouble. SWAT has every opportunity to win this game on Friday night.
And Steve,
Brian,
I think one X factor here for Swarthmore is the freshman off the bench. One of the guys that's taken a lot more minutes when Chris Bourne went down, and that's Henry Cosino. He's a 6'5" freshman, and he's gonna. The hope is it grow a couple more inches. I mean, again, freshman in college, there's plenty of time for that. But Cosino, a guy that can step back and take the three. He's starting to take his game a bit off the dribble as well. He came in and I don't think was ready to do that at this level, but he's starting to become more and more dynamic, starting to go off the dribble, in addition to his lethal shot from three. And you certainly never want to see a guy like Bourne go down. He's one of the better big men in this league as an undersized four, but Cosino has come in and really stepped up in the last 3-4 weeks. And I think that could be a key to this one.
Brian, you've had the opportunity to see the Garnet. Hopkins, one of the teams that was able to take down Swarthmore. Your thoughts on the Garnet?
Yeah, I think based on the expectations going into this year, they were the biggest surprise. I mean, picked in the preseason to finish 7th. But like you said, anyone that's been paying attention knows that this is a team that's on the rise. I don't think they have even come close to their ceiling yet. We got a couple more years, at least with this current cast of characters, that are going to really have some names that stick out. And you mentioned Coach Kosmalski, building that winning, having that winning culture coming from D1 program. I actually went back earlier and I was looking at some of those preseason videos that Steve, you guys all put out, and they were just tremendous. And one of my favorite ones was they're talking about what's something that people don't know about you. And his answer was that people were surprised to learn that he does yoga, and that one had me laughing because in that game against Johns Hopkins, he had a vein popping out of his forehead. I think he actually might have picked up a technical at that game. So it's good to know that afterwards he was able to go home and take some deep breaths and do some downward dog or whatever it is. But yeah, I think when you look at the roster, they have a lot of guys that I think are like, oh yeah, names. It's, everyone knows Chris Bourne. But when you say, oh, right, they have Sean Thaxter, oh, yeah, or like Matt Brennan, oh, yeah, Zach Yonda and Shane Leffler and Robbie Walsh. And I don't think they're a flash in the pan. They're going to be competitive for some time. Having to replace Bourne, I mean, they've had over a month to sort of figure out what they look like without him. But you don't just find 14 points per game and a guy who shoots 65% from the floor from nowhere. Having this be the first time in a long time they've been in the postseason, it'll be really interesting to see how they're able to respond to the different set of circumstances in the environment. But I don't know, they're for real, and I think that anybody who's going up against them has got to be at least nervous, given what they have shown from the beginning of this year all the way through the end of the regular season.
Bob, let's expound on that. The fact that Swarthmore has not been in the conference playoffs since 1997. As a young group making their first appearance, and they're running into the hottest team in the conference right now in Dickinson. What's it going to take for Swarthmore to knock off the Red Devils?
Well, I mean, it's an easy first way to go about it, an easy way to answer the question, but to stop Ted Hiddenkamp is going to give them a big opportunity there. But still, there's a lot of additional talent on this Red Devils team that can make things very difficult. Even the victory at Tarble Pavilion at Swarthmore when they were able to take down Dickinson the first time before dropping in the second game, you could see how difficult the matchups were for Swarthmore. And it's not the same construct as the Hopkins team, but Johns Hopkins with their size made things very difficult on Swarthmore. Clearly a smaller team and like to score that way, space the floor, but they can have a tough time rebounding at times, and especially on the offensive glass. If they can't produce those second opportunities, I think that can become a challenge. And clearly they're going to have to score a lot of points because this Dickinson team likes to put them up and can do so very efficiently and effectively. So I think the ability to rebound on the glass as well, clearly, as it seems for most of the games for Swarthmore, the ability to knock down the three-point shot, that and the offensive glass, I think, are two real keys that could be a struggle if that does not go their way.
Doug, we talked about how big Gettysburg was, but then you look at Dickinson. They run out Robert Picca. They have Justice Melton. They have Moses Ramaki. Jewel Brown. They're all 6'4" and up. And like Bob said, that could really cause Swarthmore some serious problems.
Yeah, sure could, and good thing that Dickinson is big, because if not, then a team like McDaniel dropping to Swarthmore twice. They don't have the size. They don't have the bench. That's something that Dickinson has. They can go deep. I can't believe of course, we mentioned, Ted Hinnenkamp, but I don't think one of us has even mentioned Brandon Angrotti. I mean, this is the second leading scorer on the team. I mean, the guy can shoot the lights out of the basketball, but you just go up and down. This is a squad that can go, 8, 9 solid, deep players into the bench. I'm not saying Swarthmore does not have that, but it's so what the thing that's so important in college basketball in general is who's hot at the right time. Who is hot at the right time? And right now it's Dickinson. I mean, Hinnenkamp's averaging 22 points over this 7-game winning streak, and Bob, you mentioned you have to stop at Ted Hinnenkamp. My question is it even possible right now? Sometimes when a guy is hot, he's hot, and a heat check doesn't matter if he continues to heat check, because what's 7 games, what's 8 games? It's just another one for Ted Hinnenkamp.
Well, it's prediction time on the first semifinal on Friday night. Dickinson and Swarthmore. Connor, we'll start with you.
Swat's had a really good run this year. We've talked about it for such a young squad. And obviously, I think Coach Kosmalski, the conversation for Conference Coach of the Year, I think starts and ends with him, what he's done with this Swarthmore team to take them from 7-18 and 18 his first year to 19-6. This year is obviously a good accomplishment, but it's hard to go against the hottest team in the league right now, which is Dickinson. They've won their last 7. During the streak, they've got some nice wins. They just beat F&M on the road by 2. They beat Swat by 9. They beat Gettysburg by 17. They beat McDaniel by 7. And they needed time this year to figure out their really young team. Let's not forget this is a team that not only lost Gary Wickstead, but Chris Cox graduated, Pete Yanks graduated, Steve Collins graduated. So they needed some time to figure it out. But now the young guys finally had time to gel together. But in the end, I think Dickens makes it 8-0, and they'll go to the conference finals with a really close but hard-earned victory over the Garnet this weekend.
We've been fortunate to have Bob with us. I know he's going to have to duck out here soon and return to previously scheduled engagement. Bob, we're curious as to your pick. We put Doug on the spot with Gettysburg McDaniel. No, put you on the spot with Dickinson and Swarthmore.
Sure. Yeah, I go back and forth on this one, and I think that the matchups are clearly defined, and it's will Swarthmore be able to match up with the size? Will the length of Dickinson, especially on the wing, make things difficult from three-point range? I mean, those matchups are pretty well defined. So I think it just comes down to execution in the final few possessions. I could see that going either way. Not necessarily in the business of making predictions, but I think I could see Swarthmore squeaking this one out late. Certainly could be a Brennan 3, or like I said before, I think Henry Cosino has something to say before this game is over. The freshman, I think, in his first Centennial Conference tournament game, has something to say, and I think Swarthmore will squeak this one out real late, just like Connor said.
I think Henry will be the first representative from the great state of Minnesota to grace the Centennial Conference tournament. He certainly had an outstanding freshman year. Brian, your thoughts?
So for Dickinson, tale of 2 seasons, really. After starting off 2-9, they were 1-3 in the Centennial, and reeling off the 11-3 over the end of that season. They were just 1 game over 500 overall, but the majority of those losses, non-conference losses, against no slouches in the non-conference schedule that they put together, and you got to give them credit for trying to challenge themselves. We've talked at length about Hinnenkamp and Angrotti. They are, I think, the best 1-2 backcourt in the conference, and after replacing not just the slew of guys they had last year, but in back-to-back years, 2 of the best players in program history, not just Jerry Wickstead, but also Adam Honig. You got to give them a lot of credit for coming back and making it back into the playoffs. If they have a weakness, it's that they run 8 deep. That's pretty much it. After 8, it drops off pretty steadily. Prediction-wise, for Swarthmore, you look at them, you say, all right, this is the first time they've ever picked up votes in the top 25. And that, I think, regardless of what happens this weekend, you got to say this is a success. This program has taken a big step forward. They have done what they wanted to do. Obviously, there's more that they'd like to accomplish. But I think Dickinson, with their experience in the postseason, with building some confidence in the latter portion of the regular season, I think they're scary. They're my pick right now because having just seen them at Hopkins, and then I watched that game against F&M. They are just so fast. Justice Melton, I think, is one of the fastest guys we've seen in a while. Not to mention all the other guys that he has around him. I got to go with Dickinson in that matchup.
And Doug, your thoughts on the first semifinal, the Red Devils and the Garnet?
Sure. Bob, you mentioned that we're not in the business of predictions, but this is the only time that we get to do it, man.
Yeah.
So this is awesome.
Yeah, welcome to the club.
Yeah, right. Hey, I mean, I've talked about it already. I'm a fan of who's hot at the right time, and just taking a look at schedule-wise, for Swarthmore, 3 out of the last 4 games they've played have been against teams not in the playoffs right now. Yes, they took care of business, but the one team that is in the playoffs, Dickinson, they lost to. Well, as for the other side, for Dickinson, 3 out of the last 4 teams that they've played in the conference schedule are in the playoffs. Of course, they have won all 4 of those games. So trending in the right direction. I think Dickinson wins, and I got to tell you the truth. I think they win, I don't want to say comfortably, but I'm going high single digits here. Maybe some late free throws are needed. I'm looking in the 8 to 10 point range, a Dickinson victory over Swarthmore.
That's the first semifinal. The second semifinal will pit the winner of the first round game between McDaniel and Gettysburg against the top seed Franklin and Marshall Diplomats on their home floor. That game is scheduled to begin not before 8 o'clock on Friday night. And Connor, we've talked about 1-2 combinations at Dickinson, at Swarthmore, and McDaniel, but boy, F&M has a tough one too, and Cedric Monet and Brandon Federici.
Yeah, they do. And you're talking about really perhaps a front runner for Player of the Year could be either one of those 2 guys. It really might come down to a matter of who Coach Robinson decides to nominate. But F&M obviously a very good year, 20-5 this year, top team in the league at 15-3. 6-2 against the other teams that are in the playoffs, which they have the best record in the league against other teams that they'll be competing head-to-head against in this tournament. I think that's something that can't be overstated. They've played against the top teams. They've posted some nice wins against the top teams. And talking about Cedric Monet, you're talking about a guy who's been playing beat up all year. He's had his shoulder wrapped every single game, and there's reports that he's had his face beat up, and you could see a couple times he's been struggling during games with injuries, yet he's still almost averaging a double-double every contest. He's got 10 double-doubles in the season. Really just an effective inside player on the post. And then you talk about Federici, 19.5 points per game last year as a freshman. Follow that up this year, second in the league at scoring at 17 points per game. And early in the season was a little bit concerned with Federici because he had struggled shooting the ball when the year started. In the first 12 games, there were 17 times in the first, 12 times in the first 17 games. I'm not a math major, I apologize, where he shot below 45% in a contest, but then over the last 8 games, he shot below the 45% mark just twice. So he's really started to figure out his shooting at the right time towards the end of the year when Frank a tough overtime loss. It could have gone either way. But the combination of those 2. And then you also look at Hunter Eggers. He's stepped up this year and provided Federici with some help in the backcourt. 12 points per game. He's 10th in the conference in assists. He's 2nd in the conference in steals, so he's a good threat at both ends of the floor. Matthew Tate still has 2 more years after this, but he's really stepped up as a sophomore. The only thing that concerns me with this Franklin Marshall squad is their depth down in the post. Obviously, we talk about how great a player Monet is, but he doesn't really have a whole lot else down there, not only in the starting lineup in the post, but coming off the bench. Sean Hines and Lionel Wana have been switching in and out of the lineup at the post, but none of their numbers are spectacular. So the real question is, yes, F&M has the guard play. Yes, they have Monet down at the post. But can another one of those posts step up here in the playoffs and deliver them a conference title, which would be their first since 2012, back when Giorgio Milligan was a senior. 4-year drought without a title for F&M, which lots of teams would love to go only 4 years without winning a title, but up there in Lancaster, you go 4 years without winning a men's hoops title, and people start to get a little concerned. But F&M has the pieces. They just have to get a little bit more consistent, help out Monet some down in the post.
Brian, you had a chance to see the Diplomats come to Baltimore a week or so ago, and the Blue Jays came out victorious. What did they do right? How did they defend Franklin and Marshall? What did they do to pull out the victory?
Yeah, I think it's sometimes the luck factor comes into play. it's hard to pinpoint just one thing. When I look at this F&M team coming into this year, I think on paper this was one of the best teams that Glenn Robinson has had in a number of years. But then things happen. Injuries, particularly in the front court, have really depleted the squad. You think back to 2 years ago, same thing kind of happened to them. They ended up making it to the championship game. They didn't win, but they got there. So to be able to get to the 1 seed without, in parts of the season, Lionel Wana and Daniel Osley was out for the whole year. Nick Stern has been out for some time. Leor Levy, and the freshman Kyle Borden. Some of them will be ready for this weekend, but it's created some challenges, and it has forced Cedric Monet to have to do more than I think is reasonable to ask of any one player. They have had some guys who have filled in and really been nice surprises. Sean Hines, he got that start in the last game and had a career day. Kevin Bynes, who has played some pretty good minutes. He only had 4 points all of last season, and he's a guy who's just a sophomore, and I think we're going to see more out of him. Terrell Phelps coming back, took a year off, and now he's back, and he's played pretty well. Jordan Phelps has been a contributor. I did say I should throw an asterisk on what I said earlier about how Dickinson, I think, has the best 1-2 guard rotation in the conference. I think that the best 1-2-3 is probably F&M with Tate, Federici, and Eggers. They have just been awesome to watch. They move the ball so quickly. I think the question right now for F&M is, can Brendan Federici, still just a sophomore, reverse his fortunes from the end of last season? Teams started to get physical with him, and I think it threw him off a little bit towards the end of the year. He's gotten bigger. He's gotten stronger. He's more familiar with the program and the speed of college basketball. And obviously, scoring is not or rarely ever an issue with him. But is he able to sort of go into the playoffs with a different mindset, not think about last year, not even think about what happened in what was the closest of games we've seen all year with Dickinson and F&M over last weekend, and sort of just go and take care of business. Cedric Monet, as you said, just 25 points away from 1,000 and I think 25 rebounds from 800. He has had quite a career, and we'll see what he's able to do here in the postseason for him. And if it's just him in that low post for F&M, is it going to be a challenge he's able to rise to?
Bob, two of the best games I saw this year were F&M and Swarthmore. Just out-and-out wars. What did you see in the Diplomats this year, and what's it going to take for them to come away with a conference title this weekend?
Well, the word I would come up with for Franklin Marshall is resilience. And you wouldn't think resilience right at the top of your head because they've been the #1 team all year long. But I think a big part of the reason they are the #1 team is their ability to get it done in so many different ways. And that was just a very comprehensive look at the entire team. So I'll take it from more of one example perspective. And Brandon Federici, as a sophomore, comes in and 4 minutes into the game has 2 fouls, has to sit for the remainder of the half. Franklin Marshall was able to stave off Swarthmore on the road, only trailed by 1 at the end of the first half. Federici comes in, plays a total of 23 minutes in the game, and scored 23 points for 27 overall in the second half. And so to have the other teammates, I mean, there are just a myriad of guys that can go out and play well. Monet clearly has not been healthy all year. The fact that they have the depth that was explained so articulated so well before, I think that is what makes this team so good and makes them the favorite, not to mention a great home court advantage. I'm sure that place will be rocking this weekend. And on this note, I have to let you guys go. I appreciate you guys having me this evening. Look forward to many more of these and look forward to catching some of you guys out in Lancaster.
Bob, appreciate you participating with us tonight. Bob Long, who covers, does the play-by-play, does an excellent job for Swarthmore College. Thank you very much. Doug, your thoughts about the Diplomats?
Well, Steve, they're coming off of the first home loss of the year. I mean, that's a surprise within itself. Again, we mentioned it before. It was a heck of a game within a hot Dickinson team. But, I mean, listen, you mentioned all the names. I don't need to mention them again. You know who the shooters are. You know who the post players are. But here's the deal. 20-5 overall right now. They're ranked in D3 hoops. Lancaster Bible, Carnegie Mellon, Hopkins, Dickinson, and that 5th loss, was Gettysburg. If you want to go back to that. Back on January 20th, yes, it was at Gettysburg. It's a completely different story. 73-57, it was a large loss for Franklin and Marshall. But you take that into account. You take into account that they've lost half of their last 4 games, and now you start to scratch your head a little bit. You say, is this the same Franklin and Marshall team that we've been seeing for a majority of the season? Now, I don't know if it was Connor or Brian who mentioned, I think it was Connor who said the post play and how they're not so deep with Hines and with Awana. You know, I obviously didn't get a chance to see that Gettysburg F&M game at Gettysburg, but I don't know if that necessarily worries me too much, simply because Gettysburg is not so deep in the post either. This is to get to the championship game, of course. I think Monet does a fine job. I think Hines and Awana have no problem picking up the slack. It's a Gettysburg team that, in my eyes, isn't too big. F&M certainly has some inches on them, and it's a game that F&M should win, in my eyes.
Doug, let me ask you very quickly, and we noticed that Franklin Marshall, for longtime viewers, will know that Franklin Marshall is just a different team on the road than they are at the Mazer Center. How important is it for Franklin Marshall to have the home court this weekend?
It can't be understated. I mean, I've had an opportunity to watch a few of the games this year, and that student section, I wish I went there. I wish I went to F&M and was part of the student section. I mean, it's so loud that the kids are so into it. And as a player, I didn't play basketball, I played soccer, but when you have that crowd behind you, it's a different feeling. The adrenaline is different, but at the same time, tournament time, it was mentioned, haven't done it since 2012 on the conference tournament, you need to take a step back and say, hey, there's a job to be done. You can't have too much adrenaline. It sort of reminds you on senior day where the first 5 minutes are gone by and your star player who never asked for a break puts the fist up and says, Coach, I need out. Well, that kind of messes up the rotation. F&M can't experience that. They need to enjoy it, but at the same time, they just need to take care of business.
Prediction time. Well, as we wrap up the conversation for the men's tournament, Connor, we'll start with you. Who do you like? Who's going to walk away with the Centennial Conference trophy on Saturday night?
Well, first off, in this semifinal, obviously, I give the edge to Franklin and Marshall over Gettysburg. Bullets, I think, will keep it close with the Diplomats for a while, but F&M, they're going to have the home court advantage, and this is a team that wants to get back in that title game. They've been knocked out in the semis the last 2 years, and I think they'll be able to make their way into the title game this year. And then you've got F&M and Dickinson, and it's a different cast of characters on both sides, but we've seen this story the last 3 years in a row. Dickinson knocked F&M out last year in the semis. They lost to F&M lost to Dickinson in the 2013 title. So Dickinson, new cast of characters, but they've sort of seemed to have the Diplomats' number. And it's this time of year, when you're hot, it's really hard to pick against a hot team, and I can't find myself as a way to do it on Saturday. I know F&M's going to have the home court, but Dickinson just went there and proved that they can beat Franklin and Marshall on their home court. They posted some big wins over F&M in the past, and in the end, we mentioned Dickinson and a lot of their core players are young, but they've got the pair of seniors in Ted Henningkamp and Brandon Angrada. They won't let the Red Devils lose this game to the Diplomats. I'm calling the upset. Dickinson beats F&M and keeps F&M winless in title games for the last 4 years.
Brian, who you got this weekend?
Well, I guess going back to the semi, if I said Gettysburg would win earlier, I think they're going to fall to F&M. That first game was pretty ugly, 73-57 back on January 20th. And then the second one was kind of ugly the other way just a week ago, 71-60. F&M was able to figure it out at home. So then I guess pins you against F&M and Dickinson one more time. And for anyone who's watching this and didn't get a chance to watch the F&M Dickinson game last Saturday, I strongly suggest going back and at least watch a few minutes of it. Visually, I think it was one of the most stunning games I've seen in a really long time. There was a code blue for F&M fans, and Dickinson always travels really well, and so you had the blue on one side and the red on the other, and it was loud and it was raucous, and it was just really cool to be able to watch. Fortunately, I wasn't able to be there. We've seen some really great games with these two programs the last couple of years that game on Saturday came down to a couple of missed free throws and a turnover in the end. You could say it's a coin flip, but I think F&M is going to have a renewed sense of purpose. They're going to come back, and I think they're going to win. They're going to take home the title for Glenn Robinson, who won his 900th game this season, and he'll be able to keep marching, going to the postseason, and see if he can take these guys that he has developed and maybe go on a bit of a run in the NCAAs.
Well, it's interesting. The guy who is enjoying making the predictions most of all tonight, Doug, will have the opportunity to take the panel one way or the other. Who do you have this weekend, Doug?
Yeah, Steve, I want to talk about the McDaniel woman, so let's get over here. No, I'm going. Of course, Dickinson and Franklin and Marshall in that final matchup on Saturday, and I'll keep it simple. I think Franklin and Marshall will take it, just simply because of the redemption factor. Got them on their home court this past weekend. Franklin and Marshall, overall, I think they are the better team, maybe not the hotter team, but for me, the better team takes it in the end.
We'll wrap up the men's conversation by just taking a look in our crystal ball at the selection of the Conference Player of the Year. There are certainly a number of quality players in the conference this year. Connor, who's your choice for the Centennial Men's Player of the Year?
Yeah, I tipped a little bit earlier when I was talking about some of the better players in the league, and Ted Hennenkamp, I think it can't be overstated what he's done, not only over the last month for the Red Devils, but for the whole season. The conference is leader in scoring. He's in the top 5 in rebounding. He's really taken a corely young Red Devils team and, along with Brandon Andrade, sort of willed them back into the conference playoffs and into the conference title picture. But really, you have to look at Franklin Marshall, 15-3 in the league this year, and obviously a pair of players that had great years, Brandon Federici and Cedric Monet. I really think it comes down to who Coach Robinson wants to nominate, because whichever player, he could go with Federici, he could go with Monet. Monet, I think, because of the fact that F&M has had the lack of post players, I think the fact that Monet was able to give them something down in the post, he's almost averaging a double-double, plus he's been doing it while playing hurt all year long, and he's a senior, whereas Federici still has 2 more years. I think G-Rob will nominate Monet, and I think in a very close vote, he'll get the edge over Hennenkamp. He's a senior playing on the best team in the league and deserves that award for what he's played through this year.
Just to fill everyone in, what we do at the Centennial Conference is each coach is able to submit one nominee from his team for Player of the Year. That's why some of the discussion that's been mentioned about Monet or Federici for Franklin and Marshall. Brian, your choice for Player of the Year?
Yeah, I think you said it. There are a number of pretty serious contenders in the Centennial this year. With Ted Hennenkamp, he reminds me in a roundabout way. There was that Nike commercial a number of years ago with Glavin and Maddox. The chicks dig the long ball. If the chicks or the voters dig the scoring, then he will be the guy. 17 points per game. He ended up first in the conference. He still gets 7 rebounds per game, so it's not as though he's one-dimensional. But he's a guy who can shoot, and he's dangerous. He's lethal. He's a guy he's just awesome. He's been fun to watch if you're a Red Devil fan, and if you're not, then you're happy to see him go. Tim Stewart, I think, might be a dark horse candidate. 16 points per game. He shoots 50% from the floor as well. But, Cedric Monet, I think he's my guy. He pretty much averages a double-double and has over the course of his career. I think he is the most complete, dependable, reliable, multifaceted guy in this conference, and might be one of the top ones in all of D3. 4th in scoring, 1st in rebounds, 1st in free throw attempts. He plays a ton of minutes, 10 double-doubles this year. And although it's not a career award, sometimes it can feel that way. And what he's done this year, he's earned it. He's a guy who started off. He only played 2 years of varsity basketball in high school. He was a soccer player, and for a 6'7" kid who really, it took him a couple of years in college to learn the game, or adapt to it rather. He has just really blossomed. It's been fun getting to watch him the last couple of years, and I think it would be a really nice honor if he were able to take that home after his senior season.
And Doug, we'll wrap up the men's conversation with you. We've heard from Hennenkamp. We know Monet, Tim Stewart, certainly a dark horse. Who's your choice for Player of the Year?
Sure, Brian, who would have thought soccer over basketball in Cameroon?
Yeah,
Huh?
exactly.
No, he made a good decision, though, that's for sure. My pick in the end is Monet. And everyone has talked about almost averaging a double-double. He does a very solid job playing through injuries. That's very obvious with everything that he's had wrapped up this year. But how about his defense? I don't really look at Brandon Federici as a great defender, I have to be honest. I think he kind of mails it in on the defensive end. Cedric Monet, he does a lot of things defensively for this FNMT. He clogs up the lane. He forces, bad shots, awkward shots. That's not something that you see out of a Federici. Camp is up there. He's my number 2. Of course, my number 3 is Tim Stewart. And I want to fight for him because, listen, other than Camp and Monet, Tim Stewart, he didn't have the supporting cast of those guys. Without Tim Stewart or Wes Brooks, McDaniel isn't even close to a 5 seed. They're probably towards the bottom of the Centennial Conference. So a guy who, he can play defense too, but he can, shoot 14, 15, 16 times a game, shoot, a very well percentage from the floor. He deserves consideration. He's not going to win it, but he deserves it at the very least.
My name is Steve Ulrich. I'm the Executive Director of the Centennial Conference. You're watching our 4th annual tournament preview as we take a look at the men's tournament and the women's tournament heading into this weekend. I'm joined by some of our esteemed play-by-play guys in the conference, Doug Raftery from McDaniel, Connor Flegel from Washington College, Brian Stabby from Johns Hopkins. We just had a great conversation about the men, and we're ready to jump into the women's tournament right now. We're going to start with Connor. Let's take a look at that first-round matchup tomorrow night. Haverford College, the number 5 seed, traveling to Carlisle to take on number 4 Dickinson. Haverford's been in the postseason the last couple of years. They've been a force to contend with. I don't think any of us saw Dickinson making the playoffs this year. What a tribute to the Red Devils. Connor, your thoughts?
Yeah, we mentioned sort of the same thing with the men's side, Coach Kosmalski, what he's done with the Garnet. Big shout out to Catherine Bixby and just her second season for the Red Devils, what she's done with this program, taking a team that was just 7-17 a year ago in her first year, 4-14 in the conference, and now you're talking about a team that's 15-9, 11-7 in the league. They've won their last 3 entering the tournament, and really that it starts with that pair of juniors, Helen Roberts, Mary Martin, a pair of outstanding players. Dickinson was a team the last couple of years. They had the young pieces, and you could tell they needed time to gel, needed time to play together and build towards something special. And you've really seen them blossom and take off this year to the tune of 11-7 in the league. One thing that concerns me with the Red Devils, though, against the playoff teams, they're 2-6 against the playoff teams. They swept Haverford, who they'll get at home in the first round matchup tomorrow night, but then they lost their other 6 games to the other teams in the playoffs, and they cleaned up against the rest of the league, 9-1 against teams that didn't make it. So the thing that would concern me the most about the Red Devils, can they, if they can get by Haverford in the first round, can they go ahead and make some noise against a team like Muhlenberg, who we all know how good Muhlenberg is, we all know how much postseason experience they have. That'll be something interesting, but just the fact that Dickinson was able to make it to the tournament this year after the last couple of years they had is something really special. And then you look at the Fords, 15-10 overall, 10-8 in the league, a little bit of a down year, but a squad that was sort of rebuilding. The players, that big gunners they had in the past. Nina Voigt's not there. Elizabeth Lynch isn't there. You look at some of their top contributors. Sierra Burkle, leading scorers, just a sophomore. Samantha Wetzel's a sophomore. Macy Goldbach was looking like someone who could be the conference's freshman of the year until she got hurt. She's been a little bit sluggish to regain her form since she returned from injury. But they're still a very deep team. We know how good Haverford is defensively, and they have the defense to, if they can make teams miss shots and keep the scores in the 40s and low 50s, they can beat anybody in this league. We've seen that with Coach Morgan's squad over the last couple of years.
I think one of the unsung matchups, Brian, that you look at is Samantha Wetzel, 6'2 sophomore, maybe even 6'3 sophomores at Haverford. But Dickinson has a good pivot player as well in sophomore Cassidy Lesher. That's maybe just a matchup a lot of people haven't thought about.
Yeah, I think it should be a really good one. For Haverford, Wetzel, 10 points per game, just a hair under 8 rebounds per game. She shoots really well, too, 47% from the floor this year. Lesher, you said the sophomore, she's second in the conference of rebounds, 9.5 per contest. I think that should be a nice matchup to watch. in that 4-5 game. When you look at Dickinson, in my mind, I think they are right where they ought to be, sort of in the middle of the conference in most statistical measures, most of the key ones at least. They bounced back from a tough overtime loss against Haverford, who they play tomorrow, and they won 4 of their last 5 this year in fairly convincing fashion. When you have 2 players who are in the top 4 in three-point shooting in the conference, I think you put yourself in a pretty good position no matter what you're doing. Still a young squad. Generally, I mean, just 2 seniors. They do have 5 juniors. I expect some big things from them again next season. We talk about coaches a lot. I think Catherine Bixby, she was a very successful player at Ithaca. She was an All-American and then served as an assistant coach on a squad there that set a program record in wins. That's really going to help having that experience with this year, with this team for Dickinson. I think they match up better against some of the top teams. They're 4-4 against the 4 other teams in the playoffs. Haverford just 2-4 and 0-4 against McDaniel and Muhlenberg combined. With Haverford, the thing I like most about this team right now is they have been in this position before, namely last year when they won to make it into the semifinal. I really like this program. I love Coach Bobby Morgan. She's one of my favorites in the Centennial. It's not just because she's a Bruce Springsteen fan. I think she did a really wise thing in bringing on a former player who was a real standout in Jackie Pizzuto to be one of her assistant coaches. And I think they're a squad that you say any given night, they can keep games close. They are lights out shooting free throws. That always seems every year to play a role in the postseason. And I think it's going to be a really fun one between that 4-5 seeds right there with Dickinson and Haverford.
And we do like the Coach Morgan as a Springsteen fan. That was well played, Brian. Doug, you look at some of the other players for Haverford. We haven't even mentioned Sierra Burkell. She's almost a double-double machine. She's been around. She's going to give you 9 or 10 points a game. She's going to give you 9 to 10 rebounds a game. You take a look at the lone senior, Olivia Walsh. She has really stepped up her game this year and really led them into the playoffs. So what else do the Fords have to do to take down the Red Devils on the road?
Well, it's been tough for them. They've lost to Dickinson twice this year, so that's something to take note. I mentioned before, it's always difficult to defeat a team 3 times, but they have taken care of business twice. By the way, I'm a New Jersey guy, so Bruce Springsteen, thumbs up right there. But I mean, you mentioned Burkell. I mean, she averages 11 points per game, just under 9 rebounds per game at the same time. She's kind of a little bit of a bigger body. Walsh can shoot the basketball, 10 points per game for Walsh. One of the main things that I want to pay attention to, and Steve, this was fantastic that you included this in the notes that you shoot out to us for the Centennial Conference to help us prep for our broadcast, is that this is a defensive game, and it was a defensive game in both times that they played each other. But for Dickinson, 10 out of the last 11 times they have held a team under 60 points, they have won the game. Now, this is a Haverford team that does not score the basketball very well. They score just 54 points per game. So what is that going to play into this contest? Can Haverford get past their season average a little bit? I mean, you go back to those games that they played against Dickinson, 43-37, so Haverford poured in 37 points, and then they scored just 44 points in a 9-point loss at home against Dickinson. So that's been the trend so far. Dickinson's played better defense. I think it's been as simple as that. And if that's going to stay true in this matchup, then you'd expect Dickinson to defeat it again.
Connor, let's take it over to you. It's prediction time. We take a look at that first round game. As Doug mentioned, Haverford has not been as successful against Dickinson in scoring the basketball, but it's Dickinson's first time in the playoffs since 2010. Who do you have in the first round matchup?
Well, first off, I'd like to say that I love Coach Bobby Morgan too, but not because of her Springsteen, but because of the fact that I just got to finish watching her son Pat play basketball for the Shoremen for 4 years,
Sure.
which was really nice. But actually, I got to talk with her quite a bit and talk basketball strategy. Just a really good, really smart coach for Haverford. You look at the first round matchup here, Dickinson and the Fords. It's not only the fact that Dickinson beat Haverford twice this year, it's the way that Dickinson beat the Fords. You know, we've talked the last years about Haverford. What's the Haverford basketball game? Mid-40s, high 40s low 50s, really defensive, grinding out type of game. Not many teams in the years past could stick with the Fords when the Fords play that game. Dickinson did that this year twice, and they beat Haverford twice by doing so. Held the Fords to 37 the first time, 44 the second time, and it really made Haverford struggle on offense. The Fords, they've got to find a way to score. They've got to find a way to avoid turning the ball over. They're one of the worst teams in the league when it comes to turning the ball over, and they're dead last in the league in steals, which is if you're turning the ball over, you've got to find a way to recreate some of those chances, and if they're not able to do that, Dickinson's going to post a third win again. But if they can come out and Haverford can find a way to score a few points, put some pressure on that Dickinson defense, the younger defense. We mentioned this is the first time the Red Devils have been in the playoffs in a while. While Haverford, they've been there. This is the 5th straight year they've been in the playoffs. They won the tournament 2 years ago. The Fords can hang around late, put some pressure on the Red Devils, maybe force Dickinson into some stakes. But we say it's hard to beat a team 3 times a year, but I think this Dickinson team, they're going to be at home. They're going to be ready for this one. I think they have the players and the talent to do it. I think they are able to step up on defense and play Haverford. Another one of those 40.
Okay, Brian, your thoughts on the first round game, Haverford Dickinson tomorrow night at the Klein Center?
I think we're going to see a low-scoring game. I don't know. I
expect the Red Devils to beat the Fords for the 3rd time this season on to the semis.
Red Devils beat the Fords. Okay. We got Connor in there. Good. So now that sets me up nicely to say that I'm going to go the opposite way. I love the spirit of Haverford. I think they are going to catch the wind and make it a lonesome day for Dickinson and make them take the long walk home. How's that?
That you're really getting good at this. We'll turn it over to the Jersey guy. Doug, your thoughts on the first round game?
Well done, Brian. Well done. I think Dickinson's going to take it. I do. I think they're a little bit more talented. At the same time, I'm excited for Dickinson too, man. I mean, this is a team that what a turnaround season for a lot of them. How about for a player like Olivia Walsh or even Burkell? I mean, it's players who have experienced down years, and now here they are, an opportunity. You're playing at home. It's a first-round game, a lot of excitement, and you have an opportunity to face the big team in the conference with a win. Of course, you can't look past Haverford by any means, but I think Dickinson takes it.
The second semifinal on Friday night, not before 8 o'clock, will pit the number 3 seed Gettysburg College Bullets and the number 2 seed McDaniel Green Terror. McDaniel had the opportunity to secure the top seed and bring the Final Four to Westminster, but lost in the regular season finale to the Orange and Blue. Doug, you were on the call of that game. Give us a little insight on the Green Terror, and certainly I think all the conversation starts with Lindsay Nichols.
Yeah, sure does. I mean, she has been phenomenal. We were chatting before that. Before we got on air, it's crazy that she can shoot 6 of 24, 25 in a game, and the Green Terror can still win by double digits sometimes. Now, that hasn't been the case this year. They haven't won many games by double digits because they've been kind of known as the cardiac kids. That's what head coach Becky Martin has labeled her team because of so many fourth-quarter comebacks. I think it's 6, if I'm correct, this year, fourth-quarter comebacks, which they trailed and come from behind to win in regulation or overtime. But to tell you, it was kind of disappointing the way things ended up against Gettysburg. It was a game when they played at Gettysburg. They had tied their season high in points scored, the Green Terror. They ended up winning that game against the Bullets 73-60. It was just one of 2 times they've scored 73. Of course, known for the defensive pressure and, of course, tight games. But they ended up giving up 73 back on Saturday and fell by 9 to the Bullets. And I tell you, I was talking with a couple coaches on the staff of the Green Terror, and they think that Gettysburg might even be the deepest team in the Centennial Conference. And now you're talking about a team that's the 3 seed and going to put that on them as kind of a label. I think the Green Terror, they might be in trouble. They might be in trouble. Lindsay Nichols, of course, just under 20 points per game. You have Brittany Davis. It's really the Davis-Nichols connection. The assists come from Davis. You need just 5 more to reach 400, 9th player in Centennial Conference history to do that if she can indeed do it. But you have Carly Zepps as well down low. Problem was for the Green Terror is they couldn't stop anybody defensively for Gettysburg, which is very, very rare for the Green Terror. And you worry about someone like an Emma Dorsheimer. She scored more than 20 points on Saturday. You have Jessica Porter. She's kind of haunted the Green Terror throughout the years. And then you have Gibbons as well, who is very effective. She actually hurt her ankle for a little bit on Saturday, or knee rather, got it wrapped on up, came in, and nothing changed whatsoever. So that's the big 3 for Gettysburg. And McDaniel struggled against defending in the post specifically, against even a Dorsheimer cutting through into the post. Not a big McDaniel team, so when teams are able to slice on in like a Dorsheimer can so effectively, and then they have someone like Porter who can even post up and she can shoot the basketball, and then someone like Gibbons who has post and block moves, it's a team that gives you potential issues that you don't see every day.
Brian, we're going to turn to you. Your thoughts on the Green Terror and their matchup with the Gettysburg.
Yeah, McDaniel, well, first I should say, so Doug was kind enough to let me share a broadcast booth with him earlier this season. I got to call the McDaniel-Washington contest, I believe it was, so I suppose the two of you would share the bond on that one.
Yeah.
And it came down to the end of the game, and it was a lot of fun. Gotta thank you for that. We had some post-game prognostications on the weather, and I believe I owe you this. I got ahead of your way. I was way off how much snow there was going to be. Butterfingers coming your way, I promise.
My man.
I picked it up for you, so I had to just get that one out of the way.
Thanks,
So with
buddy.
that being said, when I look at McDaniel, I think unless they win a conference championship, it's going to be real challenging for them to get an at-large bid. Really through no fault of their own, there are some other teams in this region that right now that are just playing lights out. They're 8th right now in the region. We talked about some of their shortcomings. The rebounding margin's not great. They have to come from behind, but somehow they have just found a way to get it done. And they have 5 freshmen, 3 sophomores, but talk about a crowd of juniors and seniors they have to learn from. Lindsay Nichols, Carly Zepps, of course, Brittany Davis, who has chipped in as well. They're 5-3 against the top 4 in the Centennial, so the other teams that they're going to be playing against in this tournament. I think that bodes well for them. Conversely, for Gettysburg, 3-5 against those other teams in the tournament. Right now, they are coming in hot. They've won 7 of 8 and 12 of 14 down the stretch. First-year head coach Nate Davis, who's done some pretty good work with them thus far. They're looking to avenge a 3-point loss in the quarterfinal from last season. But I really like this roster. Jess Porter, obviously. Emma Dorsheimer, she's probably my pick for Conference Rookie of the Year, 15 points. She's 2nd in the conference shooting from downtown. I love the Emilys and Duggan and Gibbons. You look at the two of them, the best assist to turnover ratio and 11 points per game, 50% shooting. They match up pretty well, but I mean, it could have gone any way. I mean, this game could be in Westminster. I mean, this tournament could be in Westminster. I still give McDaniel the edge, even though it's going to be a really good one, I think.
Connor, let's talk about the Bullets a little bit, and to follow up on what Brian said, maybe the hottest player in the conference right now, not named Brandy Vallely, would be Emma Dorsheimer at Gettysburg. As a freshman, she has really stepped up her game in the second half of the season, and in some respects willed the Bullets into the number 3 seed.
Yeah, absolutely. And Brian mentioned her as in the discussion for Conference Freshman of the Year. Really, I think the discussion for Freshman of the Year starts and ends with Emma Dorsheimer. The things she's done for the Bullets, 5th in the league in scoring, top 5 in 3-point shooting, 41% from beyond the arc, 2nd in the league. Really is and just to be doing it as a freshman is incredible. The way she stepped up and really helped impact this Bullets team, a team that they had the senior leadership, Kim Ryan, Emily Dugan's there. But the thing I think that sets Gettysburg apart from really a lot of the other teams in the league is the consistency of this Bullets team. Gettysburg's played 25 games this year. They've had the same starting lineup for all 25 games of the season. You have Dorsheimer, Jessica Porter, sixth in scoring and rebounding. We know what she's done over the last 4 years for the Bullets. Has really given a lot of teams around the league fits. And they just recently beaten McDaniel, as I mentioned, over the weekend. I think that's a big confidence boost for this Gettysburg team going into this game with the Green Terror over the weekend. Another thing to keep an eye on, the Bullets. We mentioned the post players they have. One of the reasons why they lead the conference in rebound margin. And then you look at McDaniel, last in rebounding. I think they really miss a player like Alyssa March, the Green Terror do. She's 9 points, 7 rebounds per game she averaged last year, doesn't play at all this year, and leaves McDaniel with a little bit of a void in the post, which the Bullets were able to take advantage of. But this is a Gettysburg team. They shoot the ball well, they score the ball well. They're second in the league in scoring. Just a very, very solid up and down team, and a team that they've beaten Muhlenberg this year. You mentioned the Mules. Everyone talks about how great Muhlenberg is. 2 losses in the conference. The Bullets provided Muhlenberg with one of those 2 losses. So Gettysburg, on the right night, can compete with anybody in this league.
Doug, let's come back to you. You take a look at the coaching. You look at Becky Martin. Becky's been here before in the conference tournament. Nate Davis, his first year at Gettysburg, but certainly a strong career. Coach at Eastern University before coming and taking the Bullets to 19 wins. What kind of impact do you see the coaches have in this contest?
The coaches never have an impact, right? No. A huge one. I mean, Becky Martin. I mean, she's coming from last year, and of course, Becky is Becky Martin, very well known. 35 years coming through under the belt, but she can't believe what this team has been able to do. So she is almost like a player this year, I feel like, because I don't think the players know how they've been able to come back and have so many fourth quarter comebacks. Her energy level is completely different than last year. I'm not saying that's a good or a bad thing, but she's kind of taken the reins and said, hey guys, this is who we are. Maybe we can't keep the adrenaline for the entire fourth quarter, so let's play hard, and then in the fourth quarter, if that's when you need to turn things on, let's turn things on. I think she understands her team, and that's been able to get them to where they are at 15-3 in the Centennial Conference. Now, on the other side, I just got an opportunity to see Nate Davis, and I mean, listen, this is a guy who, you mentioned he came from Eastern, he was there for 5 years. And this past year, they received an at-large bid. Speaking of at-large bids, so he's had some success, and he's been able to teach and to allow even some of these older players to take an opportunity to lead, but at the same time, not force, but allow a little bit of a different style of play for Gettysburg. It's obviously worked. There's no doubt about that, but. I mean, how rare is it to see a coach who has been somewhere for 30-plus years and a coach who has been there for not even 1 year face off in a game that's going to be looked at a ton by not even the Centennial Conference fans, but conferences all over the region. They're going to say, oh, what the heck, one real young guy over here, and who's the other one over there? And Coach Martin. It'll be fun.
It's prediction time. Connor, we'll turn to you. Who do you like in the second semifinal on Friday night, Gettysburg or McDaniel?
Yeah, this time of year, I think, it's great what Lindsay Nichols done for the Green Terror this year. She's kept them single-handedly in so many games. But this time of year, you have to go with the team they have the depth, that has the continuity, has multiple options, and that's obviously Gettysburg. We mentioned the same starting lineup all year. They've got players up and down that lineup who can beat you. If one of them, let's say Porter's having an off night, Dorsheimer can step up. If Dorsheimer's having an off night, Gibbons can step up. Kim Ryan there. Then they've got the team, they've got the players top to bottom that can force McDaniel into mistakes. It is McDaniel, we mentioned how they've struggled shooting the ball this year. They have a decent time scoring it, but if they have one of those struggling shooting nights, and Gettysburg can take advantage of their rebounding ability, I mentioned earlier, first in the league, and sort of exploit those McDaniel mistakes and turn them into easy baskets on the other end, to help Gettysburg tremendously in this game. I think they'll be able to do that, and expect the Bullets to. You look at the record, technically an upset, but I don't think on paper it's that big of an upset because Gettysburg is a really good basketball team. So I think the Bullets win.
One of the things we always thought about when we put the playoff format into place is that the number 2 and 3 seeds are always so equal, and to settle it on a neutral court may be the best way to determine it. Brian, your thoughts on Gettysburg McDaniel?
Yeah, and those 2-3 matchups, really, sometimes it feels like the only difference is the color of the jersey that they end up wearing because it's at the neutral location. But it's a point of pride for these players and these coaches and the programs to be the 2 versus the 3. When I look at McDaniel, I was a little bit surprised that they put out I'm going to say substandard performance, 73-64 last weekend. I just expected more, but that's just because I think of them as such a strong program. I think we're going to see a really great matchup in that game. Tip my hand a little bit. I don't think we're going to see a repeat conclusion of the last time out. I think McDaniel, probably safe to say they will trail in this game, but that's just the way they play. And if you talk a little bit about the coaching, I think Becky Martin has helped them embrace that role. So whereas some programs would say, oh well, we have to fight our way back at some of these games, and it's real tough, and they think of it as a negative, taking something where it could be perceived as a negative, turning it into a positive. That's just the difference that she brings. I think McDaniel wins that game, and in spite of my snow pick, I'll take whatever the over is on the points scoring there.
Doug, in some cases, it looks like McDaniel's been living on a prayer all year long. And as we continue our Jersey theme tonight, but this team fell behind Johns Hopkins. They didn't score in the first quarter against Johns Hopkins. Didn't faze them. They have come back time and time and time again this year in the fourth quarter. Is this another time where they're going to be able to do it in the semifinal?
Love Bon Jovi. I tell you, I think, I'm not really ever a fan of thinking that one game is going to dictate a season. I mean, McDaniel had won 5 games in a row before the loss on Saturday to Gettysburg. They lost to Muhlenberg before that. Before that, they won 6 games in a row, so they had won 11 of 12 games heading into that loss against Gettysburg. So it's not like they're reeling or anything. It more just leaves a sour taste in your mouth more than anything. And from what I've seen out of the McDaniel women this year is that sour taste doesn't last. They haven't lost 2 games in a row all year.
Yeah.
So I expect that to stay the same. I believe Lindsay Nichols will do Lindsay Nichols things. The key for McDaniel is that against Gettysburg, 2 main factors, Steve. One was this is a team that forces a lot of turnovers. They doubled up Gettysburg in the turnover category. They forced 24 turnovers of the Bullets, and they still lost the game by 9 points. They're I think last time I looked 6th in Division III in turnover ratio, if you want to call it. They're positive 8.5, right around that mark. But the challenge was the rebounding. And Gettysburg's got a little bit more size, but they got out-rebounded. It was around 43-24 in the game. And in the end, we talked about it, myself and my color commentator, was it going to be the rebounding that was the difference, or was it going to be the turnovers, and McDaniel able to put those into points being the difference? And in the second game, it was the rebounding. In the first game, it was the turnovers, and McDaniel was able to capitalize. That's going to be the key in this playoff matchup, and I think McDaniel will force enough turnovers, score enough points, and play a little bit better defense this time around.
The first semifinal Friday night will pit the top seed Muhlenberg Mules against the winner of the Haverford-Dickinson game. Muhlenberg has been a national power this year, 3rd in the Mid-Atlantic region, just outside the top 10 according to D3Hoops.com. They have a group of sophomores who have just, in some respects, for those who have watched the conference for a long time, they seemingly have come from nowhere because they didn't see a lot of playing time a year ago. So, in one respect, the success of the Mules has been a little bit of a surprise, but Ron Roan has done such a good job with that program. I guess nothing's really a surprise, Connor.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned the scary part about this team. Their key players, Rachel Plotke, Brandy Valele, they're sophomores. Okay, they've got 2 more years after this to, they've gone 22-2 this year, 16-2 in the league. They've got 2 more years after this. Christina Santone obviously is a major impact player, 12 points per game for the Mules. She's a senior. Other than that, pretty much this entire Muhlenberg squad comes back next year for Coach Roan. We know how good of a coach Coach Roan has been with Muhlenberg. They've won countless titles with him at the helm. And you mentioned like Plotke and Valele. They didn't play a lot last year, played very sparingly, but I think that was almost good for them. Sit on the bench, take in the games, earn some more experience, and then once they got the reins this year, they just took off with it. Valele's been a triple-double machine, 5 triple-doubles on the year, fourth in scoring that's Plotke's fourth in scoring, 7th in scoring, 7th in rebounding, averaging almost 9.5 assists per game, which leads the conference, 3.5 steals per game as well. So Valele, not only is she great on offense, but on the defensive end, earns so many more possessions for the Mules. One of the reasons why they're the highest scoring team in the league. But for this team to be as young as they are and yet to be as effective as they are, it really says something to Coach Roan and what he's able to do with this program year in and year out.
You talk about the assist machine, the Brandy is 5 triple-doubles, but to be able to rack up those kind of assists, you got to have players that can score the basketball. And you talked about Rachel Plotke, but you look at the unsung players in some respects. Christina Manning, who's making 2 3-pointers a game. Like you said, Santone, a number of other players come into play. Brian, your thoughts on the Mules?
Yeah, it's not so much that the Mules are first in the conference in scoring. It's that the second team in the conference in scoring scores 10 fewer points per game than they do. They are a complete team. They do everything well. It's kind of hard to pinpoint where they are strongest. I mean, they're first in three-point shooting percentage, first in field goal shooting percentage. They play good defense. They have the most blocks per game of any team. It's 7 in the conference. They have the most assists per game. They had 5 Conference Player of the Week recognitions between Manning, Valele, and Santone. And this is a squad that lost 6 seniors, including Leanna Talmy, who last year was my pick to win Centennial Conference Player of the Year. I can't argue with how it ended up going. I just thought she was so strong and might have just been what I had seen when I saw her play. But I don't know. 6-2 against the top 4. They're a powerhouse. They are really a force to be reckoned with, and it's going to be something to see what the team, whoever it ends up being that matches up against them in the semi, and then, not to give too much away, but presumably in the final, what they're able to do, if they're able to throw them off their game, because everything I've seen out of Muhlenberg this year says that this is a team that has the potential to go on a run, not just in the conference, but also in the NCAAs.
Doug, Haverford certainly won their way into the final playoff spot. It's been a truly remarkable season for Dickinson. Is there anything that those two teams can do to stop the machine that Muhlenberg appears to be on their home court in the semifinal?
No.
Enough said.
Moving right along.
Yep.
No, I really don't. I mean, I really don't think so. I mean, just to add a few more things, we talk about how efficient that the Muhlenberg offense has been. When I was able to see them when they're at McDaniel, and both McDaniel and Muhlenberg won at each other's home courts this year, I was able to talk with Katie Mitten, the assistant coach for Coach Roan, and she played at Muhlenberg and kind of went through the recruiting process with Brandy Valele. And I said, why is she so successful in pouring up those assists? And she said exactly what you said, Steve. You need other people who are able to score the basketball, but at the same time, it's a Muhlenberg team that's extremely quick. Extremely quick. And I don't know if that's necessarily Dickinson's game. They're a transition offense type of team. That's one of the reasons they're able to get out in front. They have numbers. And then they have someone like Plotke almost trailing behind. Valele slicing to the charity stripe, kicks it out to the wing, and Plotke shoots so well from outside. That's how the points start to come for this Muhlenberg team. Then you feed it inside to Santone. Oh, by the way, she plays defense and can block some shots every once in a while. I mean, she is, a complete player. I just don't think Helen Roberts and company are going to be able to even come close to Muhlenberg. I think this is pretty easy for me at least. Muhlenberg going to the championship game.
Connor, we'll throw it over to you. Is there anything that you can see Haverford or Dickinson being able to do to slow down Muhlenberg?
No. to be bluntly honest, not really. I mean, and that's not to take anything away from Dickinson or Haverford at all. Let me just make that they're a pair of very good teams. Just the fact that Muhlenberg this year is so much better than the teams towards the bottom half of the league. Yes, they've had their struggles with McDaniel. Yes, they've had their struggles with Gettysburg. They've lost once to each of them. But against the other teams in the league, they're 6-2 against playoff teams, undefeated against every team that didn't make the playoffs. And not only did they beat those teams, they beat those teams soundly. We're not talking about a lot of close games. Unfortunately, I watched Washington lose it by 29 each time they played. It was some really rough games for me to watch, but it's just amazing to see the talent that Muhlenberg has. And we mentioned something else I haven't mentioned yet, the defense of the other teams. We mentioned how good Haverford's always been and how good Dickinson's been this year. Haverford doesn't lead the league in opponent shooting percentage. Dickinson doesn't lead the league in opponent shooting percentage. The Muhlenberg Mules, as good as their offense is, are also first in the league in an opponent shooting percentage against them. So you're talking about a team that's 8.5 more points per game than the next closest team, shooting the daylights out of the ball. A Muhlenberg team that leads the conference in 6 statistical categories is second in 3 other categories. And with that amazing offense, they have the best shooting percentage defense. That's a really scary combination for any team to handle. And I don't see a way that Dickinson or Haverford, whoever wins that first round matchup, can handle the Mules.
Brian, one of the things I know we haven't talked about, if we find ourselves in a close game, whether it be in the semifinal or in the championship game, is foul shooting. And you look at Rachel Plotke, who has not missed a free throw this year, has missed 1 free throw in her career. It's just one more facet of the Muhlenberg team that makes them so good.
Yeah, I saw that earlier today, and I had known it, and then I went back and saw it again, and my jaw hit the floor. It's just like, I'm a big fan of sample sizes. I try and preface anything that isn't significant just to say, okay, well, it's a small sample size. She was 45 of 45. I mean, that's a certain point where in practice, if you can go into a gym by yourself without fans and make 45 in a row, then I'll buy you a Butterfinger as well. It's just really impressive what she was able to do this season. And looking at whoever it is against Muhlenberg, I picked Haverford. Haverford, though, lost to Muhlenberg by an average of 26 points over their 2 matchups. Again, 2 matchups, not necessarily a large enough sample size to be able to extrapolate too much, but 26 points you can definitely draw something upon. If it's Dickinson, they lost by an average of 19.5 points over those 2 games. Mules are at home. They're going to take that game, I think, pretty handily no matter who they play. And if the free throw shooting comes into effect or if it ends up being a major factor, I'll be pretty surprised. But it's nice to know that they can do it.
Let's take a look at the championship game. We'll start with Doug. Who do you think brings home the hardware?
Well, I think it's between McDaniel and Muhlenberg, from what we've talked about at least. I think Connor might have picked Gettysburg, but for me it's McDaniel and Muhlenberg. And I tell you, at the very end, I only got an opportunity to see the game at the Gill Center, a game that was close between the Mules and the Green Terror, but a game that, take a look at Muhlenberg and just how many different threats they have. And we've talked about McDaniel, and of course Lindsay Nichols comes up first, and you have Brittany Davis and you have Carly Zepps, but the Green Terror, they won the game at Muhlenberg because, they play defense, but Muhlenberg just missed shots for one of the only times this year. And that was something that both coaching staff said. And it was very evident that in the second game, Muhlenberg didn't miss shots. They didn't score as many points as they usually do. It was definitely more of a defensive battle than the Mules are used to being in. But if Muhlenberg plays anywhere close to what they have this season, I think that they take the championship again and defeat McDaniel in the final game again.
Connor, we'll turn to you. Championship game favorite?
It has to be Muhlenberg, doesn't it? I mean, they've been playing such great basketball this year, and Doug touched on something too, the shooting and Muhlenberg. How far have they been than every other team in the league this year? Their two losses this year, to McDaniel, to Gettysburg. That McDaniel loss, you mentioned how bad they shot, was the fourth worst shooting percentage for the Mules this year. The Gettysburg game they lost was their worst shooting percentage of the year. They shot just 24% in that matchup against the Bullets. So really, it's simple with Muhlenberg. They make shots, they win. And you mentioned the second time around against the Mules, they won that game, or against the Green Terror, they won that game by 4, and they shot the ball much better, and they were able to pull out that win. The thing that would concern me with the Mules, and if they get into the matchup in the finals with Gettysburg, which I went out on a limb and picked them to make the final game in spite of what everyone else said, but that's just my heart. The Mules, one thing that concerns me, the 8th most turnovers in the league this year for Muhlenberg. So if Gettysburg, who, by the way, they're not slouches at scoring the basketball either. They finished in the top half of the league this year in scoring. If they can find the ways to force the Mules not only to commit those turnovers, but then to take advantage of those turnovers, and then they can find a way to out-rebound Muhlenberg, there's no reason why Gettysburg couldn't pull off the victory against the Mules for the second time this year. But I mentioned it, Muhlenberg, they shot just 24% against Gettysburg the first time. They're going to shoot the ball much better than that against the Bullets. And despite the fact that they shot 24% against the Bullets, they still scored 48 points and only lost by 9. So even if they could shoot in the mid-30s against the Bullets this time, they only lose by 9 when they shot 24%. That's really scary for any team to handle. So Muhlenberg, they will get the conference crown this year. They'll go to 23-2, and I think they'll set themselves up for a really big run in the NCAA tournament as well.
Ryan, one of the things that we look back on a year ago, McDaniel hosted the tournament. Muhlenberg came into the Gill Center and took home the trophy. McDaniel does have a win over Muhlenberg this year, as does Gettysburg. This certainly, we've sung the praises of Muhlenberg, but I don't think this is a slam dunk by any measure. Your thoughts on Saturday's title game?
So when I went back and looked at what seems like distant history, the preseason poll going into this year, and four of the five teams that are in this tournament that were picked to be in the top 5, so everybody except for Haverford, every single one of them received at least one first-place vote. So nobody really knew going into this season who the favorite was going to be. And you watch the preseason video series where they asked the players, who do you think is going to be the team that comes out on top? And I think some of the players had to resist saying that they were going to do it. Some of them were unable to. But there wasn't much of a consensus amongst the players or the coaches either. And I don't love going chalk, but I think I have to go Muhlenberg. I think it's going to be tight. I think it's going to be a really good matchup. And part of me is holding out hope that McDaniel can do it so that we have a chance of seeing them both in the NCAA tournament. But I think I'm going to go Mules just based on what I've seen out of them this year. I don't think are a shocker. I think they were picked to finish 3rd, but everybody sort of know that when they're going to come out there and whatever they field, they're going to have a chance no matter what. But doing what they have done this year, taking a step forward with some of their younger players, they've just been dominant. They've been fun to watch, and I got to go Chalk, go Mules.
We're going to wrap up this discussion on the Women's Championship Tournament with a little conversation about your choices for Player of the Year. Certainly, we have a wide selection of talented players to choose from. Certainly, a number of players from Muhlenberg, Lindsay Nichols, are defending the reigning Player of the Year, if you will. Doug, your thoughts, what you've seen this year and who you would pick as your Women's Player of the Year.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you mentioned Lindsay Nichols, and Lindsay is certainly a main threat for this McDaniel team. 19.6 points per game. It's 2.1 points per game, more than the second leading scorer in the Centennial Conference. But I think of a Player of the Year, I'm thinking a little bit more of a well-rounded player than that, and not saying that Lindsay's not by any means. I mean, obviously I enjoy covering Lindsay Nichols and everything that she does, but I don't know if it'll come as a surprise or not, but I would pick Brandy Vowell, the sophomore from Muhlenberg. She scores the basketballs, tied for sixth leading scorer in the conference, 14.1 points per game. She rebounds the basketball, by the way, and she gets in there. She gets dirty into the paint. She'll get on the floor. I love the way that she plays the game. She's top 10 in rebounding. And then, she can dish it out every once in a while as well. 9.3 assists per game. I don't care what type of offense you run. I don't care if you're based on transition. That is just ridiculous. Brandy Valley has my vote. Lindsay Nichols in second.
She reminds a lot of folks of Kelly McKeon, who was an excellent guard at Muhlenberg. Same type of scrappy ball player, same kind of player who would get in there and mix it up with the taller players and be able to rebound. A good choice. Connor, your choice for Women's Player of the Year.
Well, I think I agree with Doug. It's got to be Vallely for Muhlenberg. She's Lindsay Nichols, outstanding player. She's had a great career, but when it comes to these awards, and we saw this last year where I picked against Lindsay Nichols and thought that Leanna Talmy from Muhlenberg should have been Player of the Year. I tend to look at what a player can do. If two players are close in the discussion, what a player can do so more all around, if they have more of an all-around game rather than do they excel at just one thing. And you look, Nichols obviously the conference's leading scorer, and yes, she can steal the ball too. She's pretty good on defense. But you look at what Vallely's done. She's in the top 5 in the league in scoring and rebounding and assisting, and is by far and away the leader in the conference in steals. She's just a complete all-around player for the Mules. And as we mentioned before, just a sophomore. Has 2 more years after this. It's the same argument we had last year when some people were talking perhaps as Brandon Federici getting Player of the Year last year as a freshman. He had 3 more years. 2 more years for Vallely after this is really scary. But, yes, I think she takes Player of the Year this year.
Brian, we'll give you the last word when it comes to Player of the Year.
Yeah, so one of the things with this conference I think is always tough is that there are players on teams, especially on the women's side, that don't make the tournament that I think should be in the conversation. And I was trying to comb through them. I think names like Jessica Jowdy at Swarthmore, Jess Parada at Ursinus, Sarah Haddon at FNM, Allie Grundy at Washington. She's just been awesome. Puts up a lot of shots and scores a lot. Nichols, a pure scorer, but it's not just that she scores. She took the scoring title by over 2 points per game more than who was in second. And like you said, it's not scorer of the year. At that point, it then becomes a question of what do you value. If it's offense, purely offense, you could say, well, Rachel Plotke, she's 3rd in points per game and 5th in field goals per game, 1st in three-point shooting. You said the perfect free throw shooting. She's also just a sophomore. Christina Santone, if you say, all right, we're going to give the award to someone who can play some really good defense, 9 boards, 3.5 blocks per contest, shoots 50% from the floor. But ultimately, and I thought I was going to have a real hot take on this, I'm going to have to make it a 3 for 3, and actually 6 for 6 because we all agreed, I think, on Cedric Monet. Vallely, I don't know if the voters say, all right, well, she's a sophomore, she's got time, we'll give it to someone who is on their way out. But she's the most complete player in this conference right now. The thing that really jumped out for me also is she set the conference record this year. She had 15 assists 3 times. And then to have 3 double-doubles in a season when the last time a player registered a double-double was in 2011. She's writing her way into the record books and still has all this time left to go. She's going to be a force for a couple of years, but I think that doesn't make a difference to me. I think she's worthy of it.
Well, there you have it. Look ahead to this weekend's men's and women's basketball championship tournaments from 3 guys in the know. We're going to give you guys some final thoughts, an opportunity to share with anything else that when you look back on the 2015-16 basketball season. Doug, we'll start with you. Any final thoughts?
Sure, we're broadcasters. We always have final thoughts, right? It's like a post-game show. Well, first, for McDaniel, and I'll kind of, stick with McDaniel. For the men's side, it's certainly been a fun year. It's kind of been an up and down year, an inconsistent year, but it's a team that's kind of rallied around themselves. When a losing streak has occurred, it hasn't really stopped them from succeeding. And listen, in the end, half the teams make it, but you have to be one of the 5 to get in. And if you get in, you give yourselves a chance to make some noise. And did I pick them? No, but if they won a game or two, it wouldn't surprise me. just based on the defense they play and knowing how Tim Stewart and Wes Brooks can go off and lead this team, and Josh McWilliams, it's a possibility that they're able to. But they've been fun. Coach Curley in his 9th season has been phenomenal. And then on the women's side, of course, it's another fantastic year. And what a surprise. I mean, Connor, you mentioned Alyssa March. She tore her ACL in a pickup game before the season. Preseason polls came out. Everyone thought Alyssa March was going to be playing this year. Oh, McDaniel's #1, target on the back. Target's on the back. Alyssa March is not playing. And here they are going 15-3 in the Centennial Conference. Nobody expected it. I think people thought they were even going to have a down year because the target was on the backs. But here they are again, an opportunity to go to the championship game. But it's been fun, man. I mean, I had an opportunity to talk with Brian, and he came over and did some broadcasts with me. I know Connor and I are both Notre Dame fans, and Steve, I know we've been in touch here and there with some emails. So it's a great conference just to stay connected, and I hope the fans have enjoyed the McDaniel broadcast this year and what we've been able to provide to them.
Terrific, Doug. Thank you. Connor, final thoughts.
Well, the conversation you two had about favorite candy bars earlier in the year, while that was great banner for that broadcast, it just was a sad reality that the Shore women were well out of that game and on their way to another loss. But it was at least a little bit of comic relief, so thank you for that. But I think while we have the forum, we need to thank just all our viewers and listeners all year long. I can't tell you after every game, even though we didn't have the best of seasons, I always have parents and fellow athletes and everyone coming up to me and saying, how great of a job we do and how much they love basketball in the conference and they love our broadcasts and being able to watch every game and really make it feel like a big-time conference. And I think that's just a tribute to the work to the three of us and all the other broadcasters in the league, Matt Nelson of Muhlenberg, another guy that comes to mind, just the work that we do just to make this conference better. And Steve, obviously to you for sending out notes every week, because otherwise we would be a little bit lost without those friendly notes and reminders every week. I found myself putting stuff into game notes that I thought I had that I clearly didn't. So thank you for that, and to Jessica as well for all the hard work that everyone's done in the conference just to make basketball better in general. But as far as the upcoming tournaments, we mentioned the women's tournament doesn't seem as wide, but there's still nothing that says that a team like a Gettysburg or McDaniel couldn't go up to Allentown and pull off a victory against the Mules and shake up the whole conference picture. It's very well possible. And then on the men's side, any one of those 5 teams could win. Those 5 teams, they've beaten each other this year. It's not a question of F&M is clearly the top seed and everyone else is just hoping for a chance in the final. Those 5 teams have beaten each other up this year. So it's not necessarily as open and shut case of a F&M Dickinson final as we've seen in the last couple of years. So it should be a great tournament on both sides, and I'll be traveling with my softball team to North Carolina this weekend, but I'll be trying to watch the hoops games on the bus because supposedly the bus is supposed to have Wi-Fi. So I'll be trying to watch as much as I can and looking forward to it. Supposed to, in quotation marks.
Brian, you get the final word with your final thoughts.
Oh boy, that's a little bit of pressure.
Veteran.
No pressure, Brian. No pressure.
Yeah, well, I guess just to echo a little bit about what two of you guys have said, this is a really fun conference to be a part of. This is my 7th season, which, all things considered, not that long. I mean, Steve, you've been here since the beginning, but I love being a part of Centennial. Now doing play-by-play for my 2nd school, and I'm planning on making my way just through all of them. I got some time, I suppose. And with you guys, we have our fun Twitter echo chamber that I hope at least some people are able to appreciate, that we have a little bit of back and forth. And on the air, sometimes it can feel like Radio Nowhere. Is anybody alive out there? But then you get those people who send you to come up to you after the game and they say, "Oh, it's been great listening to you. My son or daughter. We live far away." I had a bunch of these at senior day, and it's really validating. But it's a pleasure. I mean, we would do this, I'm sure, for much less. And it's been a blast. This year has been awesome. I'm really looking forward to the tournament. I think it's going to be some must-watch basketball. I hope your Wi-Fi works on that bus so that you can take part in it. I'm sure we'll be tweeting throughout the whole thing. It's been good, and I also want to take just half a second to thank all of our athletic communications staffs because they do a lot of really hard work. I know up at Hopkins, we have Ernie, who's our SID, but then Kelsey and Jill and Miles and Mark, and then I still am in touch with the crew back at F&M in athletic communications. Their notes are still really solid. Mickey and Brad, they've been a huge help. So it's a team effort. Takes a village, but season's finally over. I'm sad. I'm already looking forward to next year. This has been a blast this year, and hopefully we can keep it going. We should do this more often. I think this is.
Let's have a mid-season one or something, right?
Yeah, for sure.
We may have turned this one into a weekly podcast.
Count me in. I'm in.
To Doug Raftery, Connor Flegel, Brian Stabby, we can't thank you enough for everything you do for the conference and your participation tonight. It's because of guys like this that makes the broadcast that the athletic communications directors make available for all of us so special. The job they do to bring the action home, and we're just thrilled to have you guys be a part of the conference. And thank you again for your time tonight. You can catch every game of the Centennial Conference Tournament live on your mobile device, your desktop, your laptop, your viewing of choice on centennialconference.tv. My name is Steve Ulrich. For producer Jessica Huntley, for Doug, Connor, and Brian, thank you very much for joining us, and we hope to see you at the tournament this weekend.